Kenny Nguyen, I failed out of medical school, an unfiltered reflection. Let's see what he has to say.
In medical school culture, there's a huge stigma when it comes to talking about any kinds of setbacks. And because of that, I wanted to talk about my own personal experiences with failure in medical school. Exactly a year ago from when this video is going to be uploaded, I formally sent in a request to take a leave of absence from medical school.
I just submitted my request to take a leave of absence for medical school for my first year and repeat the year in July, 2 months from now.
I was deflated, I was ashamed, I was embarrassed, I was anxious about what this could mean for my future. But even more than that, I was really disappointed in myself and my performance that year. I had a really difficult time adjusting to medical school and all of the expectations that it comes with. I was still in a little bit of a COVID funk. I haven't been in school in a few years before I matriculated, and because of that, I just struggled to get in the groove of things.
Yeah, it's going from 0 to 100 real quick if you haven't been in school for a while. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant is the cliche, just because of the volume of knowledge that you're having to learn.
I didn't really have much time to process the failure because the next block began immediately. So I actually ended up failing the last block of that semester. So I failed the very first block and I failed the very last block of the fall semester. So in my school, you're only allowed to remediate 2 courses for the entire year. So if you fail a 3rd course, you're gonna have to remediate the entire year. So I studied after winter break and successfully remediated that first block that I failed. I actually crushed the remediation exam. And then throughout the next semester, I did pretty good. The only problem was it was at a cost of my physical and mental health because I gave so much up because I was so scared to fail again.
Which makes sense, but remember, medical training is a marathon, not a sprint. We'll get more to that shortly.
So I was doing really good throughout the semester. I actually got through neuro, which in my school is notoriously the hardest block of the entire year. But after I passed neuro, that's when I made the final mistake that sealed my fate. So the final neuro written exam and final practical exam were on a Friday. And after I finished those set of exams, I was so burnt out and tired, it all kind of came crashing down all at once, that I let myself get complacent. We had another exam the following Monday, so just 3 days later, but it's our clinical medicine exam. And for clinical medicine throughout the entire year so far, the exams are pretty easy. We scored very high, the class averages are very high, I did well in them. So I thought, maybe I don't have to study, maybe I can just take this weekend off. I got complacent.
It's a dangerous thing. I remember even in high school, there were times when I would feel confident because I crushed the last few exams in chemistry or math or whatever it was. And then you get a little complacent, a little bit cocky, you go into the next exam, you don't prepare nearly as much, and then smack, wake up call, right?
Me, on the other hand, I didn't study at all. Had I studied, maybe I would have gotten a passing grade regardless and gave myself a buffer. But because of my lack of, focus on just that last weekend, I let myself slip and I earned my 3rd failure.
And it makes sense because when he has that other exam on Friday and then the next one is on Monday and you're burned out, it's hard to then hit the books again really intensely Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But there's an approach to final exams, both in college and in medical school, where you're balancing multiple things. I mean, you need to plan accordingly beforehand, but creating these timelines and these study schedules to make sure you don't end up in this position where you feel unprepared for the second exam.
I am not putting blame on anyone else for my shortcomings. I failed the first block. I failed the second block. I let myself get burnt out. I didn't have sustainable habits and I let it catch up to me, and then I failed the 3rd block. It is nobody else's fault.
Kudos for taking responsibility.
There's a very, very big difference between having an external locus of control and just pointing out and identifying the reasons why you failed, right? You want to have an internal locus of control and understand what you could have done to fix the situation.
External locus of control means that control is outside of you. It's an external locus, an external location, and you don't have as much control over what does and does not happen to you. Whereas internal locus of control is the opposite. You're taking that agency. It's a much better position to have, much better mindset to have, and it's ultimately just a choice.
But in order to do that, you need to figure out what actions and decisions brought you there in the first place. I remember searching up failure in medical school when I was going through this process, and there really weren't many videos on this topic.
I think it's because a lot of people are ashamed, but it's not as uncommon as what people may expect. Med schools do a great job of filtering their pre-med candidates, right, the medical school applicants, to see who is going to handle the rigors of medical school and succeed and not fail. But I forget what the averages are, but it's a few percentage points, 3, 4, 5% per year in terms of attrition rates. And if, the average med school has maybe 100 to 150 students, then the number's not 0, right? You have a handful of students at every single program that are running into this issue.
The culture of medical school and probably medicine just in general There's this pressure to always portray yourself as perfect. You're super hardworking, you're super diligent, you don't burn out. There's this really big external pressure to just give that image off. And yes, I make study videos, I make productivity videos, I make workout videos, and sometimes I think to myself, am I adding to this toxic culture by making these videos? I mean, I'm just trying to help, but am I perpetuating this toxicity?
Dude, that's a really interesting point that I've been reflecting on recently, because this idea of needing to come across as competent and as an expert is not just in medicine. It is pervasive because it's human psychology. So I don't want to get too off track here, but I had a cycling coach who did that a lot and who kind of feigned competence, but then would do certain things. Like we were doing lactate testing on my ear at my home on my stationary bike, and he like didn't know to use capillary action on the test strips. And I kind of teased him about that, and then I was like, wait, what the hell? How does he not know this? Because he comes across as being very competent and confident. Like, oh yeah, I've done these things hundreds of times, and I'm perfect, and I'm such an expert, and I'm the greatest thing that has ever graced this earth when it comes to cycling coaching. Long story short, I no longer work with him, not because of that, but because of some other issues. I do car reviews as an example, and there are certain car reviewers who I've met, some people that I really respect because they come across as such experts, and I'm doing this more as a hobby. I know that I'm no pro, right? And we've gone to some press events together, and I've actually raced them, and I'm faster than them, not once, not twice, but three different races, 3 different vehicles, 3 different types of competition. I'm like, they kind of come across as up here, and I'm approaching it with a bit more humility, saying, hey, I don't know a lot of stuff, and a race car driver is way faster than me, but I didn't realize that I was actually gonna be faster than them. You see a lot of the same thing happening with fitness, and finally, there are more and more YouTubers talking about the importance of genetics, but people who are genetically gifted with amazing physiques are going to act like it's entirely their own training regimen or A, B, and C that they did that gave them these results, when in reality it's a combination of factors, and maybe they aren't as optimal here, but they have these incredible genetics, as an example.
Don't let the fancy edits and motivational talks on social media fool you guys, all right? Medical school is stressful, and medical school is very, very hard. It doesn't matter what anyone says. It doesn't matter about those influencers that seem like their lives are perfect, they have it all together, they're pumping a research article every single month. It doesn't matter what perception they're trying to build, right? You don't know their reality.
Because we all generally just show the best, the highlight reel on social media, not the downs, only the ups.
Everyone's so vocal about how difficult the path is, right? How hard it is and how rigorous it is to become a physician. But in the same breath, they also are so quick to put each other down and just eat their own. It doesn't really make sense to me.
I think that's going to be very program dependent. I think more institutions that have pass-fail curricula, such as UCSD, my alma mater, it's very collaborative. You don't really see much toxicity, or if you do see it, it's like just a couple people here and there, but for the most part, very collaborative. But I do agree, overall, the culture, the overarching culture does tend to be much more competitive, cutthroat, especially for pre-meds, actually, more so than for med students and for residents. But it depends on the specialty, it depends on the program, it depends on the location, the culture there.
I implore you to just step back from anything academic for a while and just ask yourself, who are you outside of medicine? What do you want out of your career? What are your priorities? Fitness has been a huge part of my life since I was 16, but that came to an abrupt halt once COVID and the pandemic hit and all the gyms shut down. And then after that, I just couldn't really get back.
Dude, during COVID, having to do those band exercises at home, the worst.
When I started medical school, I came in with the wrong mentality and the wrong idea that there just wouldn't be enough time to work out, and I just went to the gym very passively, didn't follow a program, and it just wasn't very consistent. I realized just how important going to the gym was for me. After spending some time putting back on muscle and putting back on my strength, I've been leaning out and have been making great progress.
I'm gonna sound like a broken record. I've said this so many times on MSI. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, not just because they're healthy things to do, which they are, but it also helps stave off burnout, helps you with sustainability, with that endurance, that intensity.
And I know it's a little bit of a meme where the repeat medical student is the one that starts posting on YouTube and posting on social media.
Or the guy that quits residency, right? I can relate to that meme.
If you're someone who's waiting to start back up on medical school, the best thing you can do for yourself is start building those good habits now. Make it a habit to go to the gym. Start learning how to track your own nutrition. Start picking up those hobbies that you've always wanted to do but never got around to. On top of these things, this is a great opportunity to do some soul searching.
And I'd say too, when you're focusing on these healthy hobbies, I say healthy hobbies, not unhealthy hobbies, because I don't think that watching Netflix or scrolling on Instagram, TikTok is gonna be a healthy hobby. playing board games with friends, that's good. Exercise, that's always good. Cooking, and ideally cooking foods that are good for you, that's all fine. You're gonna feel squeezed though when you're in med school because we just won't have enough hours in a day. And that's where the time management piece comes into play. And it's okay to feel busy, and it's also okay to push yourself, especially in your 20s. This is the time to see what you're made of, to really push your limits, because in your 30s and onwards, you're probably not gonna have that same level of intensity and lack of responsibility. I know it's a cliche, but it really is true. It's easier to push yourself also just because your body can take more and you can see what you're made of in your 20s. That builds that confidence that's gonna carry you out for the following decades.
And I know some of you guys might be thinking, Kenny, I literally just failed out of school. Is the solution really to focus on things that aren't related to school? For me, it was.
I think for a lot of people, that can actually be the case because the reason they failed was because they were imbalanced, right? Obviously, another part, which I'm sure Kenny's gonna get to, is the study strategies and the study approach. But don't think that if you fail out of med school, it's only the studying and it's only those things that are very directly related, because these other things that are outside that seem more indirect have a very big impact too.
I revisit my study strategies, revisited my approach to medical school, made the proper adjustments, and this pass I'm doing much, much better. And guess what? I'm actually studying a lot less than I was last year.
Yes,
In my videos,
study smarter, not harder.
this does lead me to my next point though, which is being honest with yourself. I mentioned earlier that my grave mistake wasn't failing the first block by 1 point. It was my attitude towards failing by 1 point. In the very beginning of the block, you saw the syllabus, you knew what the expectations were for passing. I failed to meet those expectations. I failed. It doesn't matter if it was by 1 point or if it was by 20 points. I knew what the standard was. I didn't meet the standard.
Yo, great mindset. I wish more people had this kind of mindset. So kudos to Kenny on that.
What actions or inactions led to your failure? You're only going to be able to work on your shortcomings if you're able to actually identify them.
And sometimes that's painful, right? A lot of people don't want to spend time thinking, reflecting, analyzing what went wrong because it's painful, it's uncomfortable, right? When bad things happen, you don't want to keep ruminating on it. But at the same time, if you don't learn from it, then you're just doomed to repeat that same failure, that same mistake. So it is critical that you do spend the time to self-reflect, speak to others as well, get their input too, because sometimes people will see things that you miss, and then you can go move forward with a new plan of action with hopefully a much higher rate of success.
Now let's talk about dealing with the judgment of others. This is another source of anxiety for repeating students, and trust me, I get it. It can be kind of embarrassing to face your former classmates, face your professors, have your new classmates find out that you're repeating. Me personally, I made no effort to really hide it. I just kind of told everybody, hey guys, I'm doing this first year over again. What's up? My name's Kenny.
Dude, I respect that a lot because it takes a lot of vulnerability, strength, courage to actually do that, because yeah, you are putting yourself out there for judgment from others, and it's a scary thing to do. I think it's part of your personal values. It's tougher to do that in certain ways. It might be easier for certain people because, I mean, this is like maybe the cynical part of me coming out, but I'm like, hey, you know, for the views on YouTube, like the negativity bias, if you talk about failing out of med school, like this video at the time of recording has 350K views, so like maybe that's gonna help. But you know, at the end of the day, it's probably a mostly challenging thing to do. It's probably mostly a very vulnerable thing to do. And I respect that. I did something similar with leaving residency. I think when I did it back in 2018, I made the video. I don't think there was any other video from someone quitting residency that I had seen. And even since then, there have been other YouTubers and other people that have quit but aren't as open or as honest about that fact. And they choose to keep it under wraps. And I don't think that you have to disclose that, but I think if you are portraying yourself to the public as being something that you're not, there's even people that I respect a lot that come across as saying, hey, you know, former surgical oncologist, or they mislead you into thinking that, and their former TED Talk description says that, when in reality they didn't even finish general surgery residency. Okay, camera dead again, so let alone surgical oncology fellowship, right? There are other YouTubers who talk about how they were former doctors, this and that, when in reality they hadn't been practicing for a number of years and the timeline was a bit off and didn't make sense. And again, it's like, I get the temptation and the strategic reasons to share certain things, not other things, and to portray things in the way that's most advantageous to you, because people do care about your level of training and what you did do and what you didn't do. But when you're doing so dishonestly, it just really rubs me the wrong way. That's why I had to be honest about it. I wish more people would be as well. And I respect Kenny a lot for doing that because unfortunately it's not as common as I think it should be.
Having spent a few months prior to starting again, feeling anxious about facing everybody made me realize that if people just talked about it more, I probably wouldn't really be feeling this way. So I decided that I was gonna talk about it more. And especially
Exactly. When you start talking about it more, it becomes so much easier for other people to also do that because they say, hey, I can identify with it. Hey, I can relate. Hey, something similar happened to me. Therefore, I now have the courage thanks to this former person. So I can relate to that because I had to keep my inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, under wraps during med school because it could be used against me when I'm applying to residency, especially something like plastic surgery where any reason to say no and to reject you and choose some other candidate who's very qualified, of course they're gonna take it because I then become a liability with IBD. And I remember reading this book, Rolf Bernisky, obviously mispronouncing his last name, but former NFL quarterback with inflammatory bowel disease. I read his book and it was so empowering, so eye-opening. And then very shortly after that, I made a video saying, hey, this is like my secret, guys. I haven't shared this. And it was me sharing this secret thing that literally, my family and then I think the girl I was dating and one of my best friends at med school knew. But I tried to keep it under wraps as much as possible because I was concerned it would be used against me. But him sharing that story helped me realize, hey, okay, I'm in residency now. I can be open about it. It's not really a big deal. And I've had viewers reach out to me from that and say, hey, thanks so much for sharing. And I think that being more vulnerable and sharing more is just, it's a net positive. It's scary. It's like you're about to jump off the cliff, but once you jump and you have your parachute, it was obviously the right decision at that point. You know what I mean?
Now, during the months that I had to self-reflect on me taking a leave of absence repeating the year, I thought about the situation. I knew that a program director was eventually going to ask me, what happened? Why did you have to remediate your first year of medical school? And I wanted to genuinely tell them that that was the best thing that could have happened to me because I learned so much. Not because it sounds nice, not because I'm romanticizing the experience, but because I wanted it to be true. We've all heard stories of people that have undergone adversity and overcame it, and it's always a great story. And I just thought, why can't that be me?
The bad thing has already happened. You cannot change that. But if you can take that bad thing and then leverage it as a catalyst to accelerate learning or, prompt some other behavior change that is a net positive, now you can go back and thank that thing and you're changing the meaning of that. So the negative thing can now become a net positive as a result. That's something that I did when I was 18 years old with inflammatory bowel disease, when I was hospitalized and lost 30, 40 pounds from my already very skinny frame. And now have this lifelong condition. As an 18-year-old, when I'm excited to finally get out of the house and be on my own, a couple months into college, being hit with this devastating news, I had to do the same thing. I was very angry. I channeled a lot of that anger and that energy into productive things like school. But I said, I'm not going to let this bring me down. I'm going to use this as fuel for this fire. I'm going to push myself extra hard, and this will become now a net positive. And you can only connect the dots looking back, right? Not looking forward. But I do credit that to being a better student and to learning these tactics and now starting Med School Insiders and my medical education businesses, because you can't teach those things unless you have done X, Y, and Z. And I wasn't going to do X, Y, and Z unless I had some experience that really pushed me to do so. So you are the author of your own life. The things that happen to you or have happened to you, you can't change that. But you always change how you react to it, the story you tell yourself about that.
I'm not just talking about it, I lived through it too. I've been there. Yes, you need to process your emotions. Yes, right, you deserve to have the time to really absorb what just happened to you, take your time to process it, and then you can move forward. I believe that everyone should always go for what they want in life. With that being said though, it is important to get a realistic gauge on just how big of an uphill battle it's going to be, and then you can decide if that's something that you want to tread.
And when you say uphill battle, it'll be much more difficult in certain specialties, such that to have a realistic chance there, now you're looking at taking maybe 2 years off to really bolster your research application. Really having to crush step 2, really having this super strong upward trajectory from your first year to later years. Can it be done? Sure, depends on the specialty, but it is definitely an uphill battle if you are failing anything in med school in your first year. I would say it's a lot easier to just choose something that is less competitive.
I can't talk about your guys' perceptions, I can only talk about my own experiences. It is not an opinion, it is a fact that I was once a bad medical student, so bad that I had to repeat the first year of medical school. And now I normally score well above all my class averages on every exam.
I love that because there's no longer I'm a smart student, I'm a dumb student, I've always been this way. It's now a matter of, this is a skill set that you can learn and that you can improve at, just like many other things in life, whether it's basketball, whether it's communication skills, whether it's strength. A lot of these things that we think are innate or fixed are skills that you can apply yourself on and improve. Just like studying, just like test taking. Love that. He goes from failing med school to now doing better than average. That's awesome.
If I already knew the material, I probably wouldn't have failed in the first place, let alone it helping me a year later, right?
Yeah, and then the way to actually test that assumption is going into your second and third year, are you also still performing above average? Because if it was only in your first year, then yeah, you're seeing the information twice. You've had twice as long to study it or see it or whatever, multiple exposures. But I'm hoping that it's mostly the test taking, right? The study strategies.
And the most important step, you have to find out what works for you.
Be careful with that. It's important to figure out what works for you for certain things. Things like, when do you exercise? Or when do you sleep? Different chronotypes, right? But when it comes to studying, test taking, there are strategies that work and strategies that are just way less effective. So there have been studies in recent years that have debunked the VARK learning style. So the VARK is like, are you a visual, auditory, reading, kinesthetic learner? And it used to be that, hey, based on your VARK style, you should try to study and learn in that way because you'll learn more effectively. Debunked. Effective learning strategies, study strategies are effective for everyone. Flashcards, spaced repetition, active recall, practice questions and practice tests used correctly, all these things, even synthesizing like summary sheets, creating your own tables, comparing things, active study methods are more effective than passive ones. So if you're saying, hey, what works for you? And you're like, oh, I've like reread my PowerPoints, something I used to do in college, and it's just like comfortable, it's easy, I've done it, it's like fine. Not effective, even if it feels better to you. When you first start doing active study strategies, it will feel uncomfortable. It'll feel bad. It'll feel like, oh, this is like too much effort. It's uncomfortable, I don't like this. That's because it's working. And give it enough time, give it a few weeks or a few months, it will then feel just as easy as doing your PowerPoint rereading. That's why I don't like, when it comes to study strategies, telling people to do what they feel works best for them. You need to intelligently choose which study strategies you use for a given class, and we talk about that in a previous Med School Insiders video, how to decide based on the evidence-based study strategies what you should do for a given type of class, whether it's history versus physics. There's going to be different types of strategies that are most effective, but as much as I love the sentiment, don't do what you think works best for you when it comes to studying. There are things that work and don't work per the evidence.
Don't expect to just go to labs and know everything and not pay attention to your preceptors or instructors. You should keep an open mind and just experience the year over again as if it's your first time seeing it. Your first run around was just a preview, now this is the real thing.
Well, what I would say there is, I'm probably misunderstanding his point. Definitely figure out what you were good at and what you were not good at, right? So that you can change. If you can then reflect on what you excelled at, what you didn't, and why you think so, you'll then go in with much greater chances of success. So as an example, back in college, I was a neuroscience major at UCLA, and a lot of people considered it a hard major, one of the hardest majors, that and biomedical engineering. And I never found it to be that challenging, not because I'm smart, but because we're good at different things. So maybe my critical thinking and reasoning was a little bit better developed, but my memorization abilities were not. Or at least the techniques I used for memorization were really complete garbage. So I then, after I got accepted to med school at the beginning of senior year, it was time for more chill upper division electives. And I chose this psychobiology class because psychobio was supposedly the easiest pre-med major. So I'm like, cool, give me something easy. I've been working hard the last 3 years, working my ass off with this IBD and dance, and just like, I was going 10/10ths for like 3 years. And I remember taking the midterm, and I got a B, and I was like, what the hell? This was supposed to be easy, what's going on? And it turns out that when it came to these memorization tests, multiple choice, it just wasn't my skill set. But I studied more for that, I got a B, and then for the neuroscience midterm that I had taken maybe a month before, I didn't study at all, but I got the second highest grade in the class simply because the professor was asking hypothetical situations. Hey, this is a made-up neuron with these new things that don't actually exist in real life, but how would it behave under X, Y, Z circumstances? And I was like, okay, cool. This is the kind of thing that I like, these puzzles where I can then think through it and apply myself versus having to recite some fact that I read 2 weeks ago. So that then informed my future decisions when it came to studying and such that, okay, flashcards are really helpful at memorizing certain things, but when it comes to actually understanding, I can rely on other things that have worked better for me.
It's not a secret that medical school is not an optimal environment when it comes to your mental health. There's a lot of stress involved. There's a lot of anxiety involved. There's a lack of agency that makes you feel like you're out of control of your own life. If you're having a hard time dealing with the situation, if you're having a hard time processing all that it comes with, consider talking to a therapist. Use your resources and take care of your well-being first.
I have seen multiple therapists over the years for various reasons, and speaking to a professional and hashing things out, whatever thoughts are going on in your head, super, super helpful. Cannot recommend it enough. I just wish that I started doing therapy sooner because there's so much upside, and I understand like the friction and the hesitation, like, do I need it? That's only for people that have X, Y, and Z, and that's not me. Anyone can do it, and I think there's a lot of upside, and just by trying it out, give it a chance to. Don't just make a decision from the first session. Try a few sessions, and just see how much more clarity you have from your thoughts, speaking with an actual professional, hashing things through.
Treat yourself with kindness. It's not weak because you're struggling with this. It's not weak because you're using resources and asking for help. It's not.
Yeah, and what I would actually say is that it makes for a cool story. Sometimes the things that suck in the moment, you look back a few years later, it makes for a cool story. If you struggled and failed at something and then came back to really kick ass later, that's a cool story, right? If things were always easy for you and, silver spoon kind of life and nothing bad ever happens and it was just easy, not a cool story. No one cares about that. You don't learn the lessons from that. You don't build the confidence from doing that.
But there were a lot of lessons I learned throughout this process that's honestly bigger than medical school, bigger than my career, right? I had to take a long, hard look at myself, look at where I was going in life, and decide that I didn't actually like where it was headed and make those adjustments.
I'm glad that Kenny's finding a lot of value in this experience, right? For those who are watching, the pre-meds, the med students out there, ideally you want to avoid having to remediate if you can do so. And what it comes down to is understand that going from college to med school, it gets a lot harder, right? And even within med school, the third year is going to generally be the hardest for most people. Sometimes the fourth year, depending on specialty, rotation, etc. And if you have this growth mindset of that, you can keep improving these certain skills. You can keep learning and growing and getting better and better with each passing week and month. You will be so much better off versus going in thinking that, hey, I hope this works out. Let's see what happens. So take that agency, take that internal locus of control, and do what you can. Find the resources like Med School Insiders, our YouTube channel, our blog, this YouTube channel as well. We go over a lot of the things that do work to help you excel, where you can still have the balanced life and you don't have to say, hey, I'm gonna do Anki 16 hours a day and not have a girlfriend or whatever.
And honestly, I'm just in the best mental space that I've been in a long, long time. I've also
Hell yeah, man. Happy to hear that.
Good friends in my new class, and I honestly wasn't really expecting that benefit. And if you guys are a little anxious about integrating yourself into your new class, I highly encourage it. Don't isolate yourself. Meet your new classmates. So if you're someone who's in limbo right now and just waiting to repeat the year, just know that it will get better. But in order for it to get better, you need to put in the deliberate work. You have to reflect on yourself, reflect on your year, and decide that you want to do it differently. You want to be better.
Dude, what a guy. What a guy.
You guys made it this far in the video. Thank you guys.
Love the video, man. Kenny, I think you're adding a lot of value to the community, so keep doing what you're doing. Good luck with med school, and looking forward to seeing your other videos.